I was reading a study recently that that correlated basically people that have favorite TV shows and like favorite characters on these shows. They were like it was specifically Game of Thrones was what was involved in this study, and people were put into an MRI, and when they thought about their favorite character, it lit up the same pathways as when they thought about themselves, which is fascinating, right? Because it's like as they relate more and vicariously live through this media figure, the more it integrates into who they are and who they want to be. And so it's interesting as we become more virtual beings, how we get intermingled with these like totally made up characters that aren't even, they're what exist in kind of a collective from the author, but also after the author or the creator puts it out into the ether, then that character kind of takes on a life of its own, right? And it becomes like an entity almost, or like a thing, right? It's like, if what is it? George R. R. Martin from Game of Thrones, the guy that wrote that, if he like turned Jon Snow into a bad guy, the like in the next season, if they made a next season, there would be an absolute revolt, right? Or if they made him like the weak character all of a sudden that was just kind of like snide or whatever, everybody'd be like, "What did you do to him?" That's not him, as if it's a real thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that is fascinating.
Yeah,
That goes to a lot of different places, honestly.
yeah, it does. It does, and it freaks me out a little bit. Because I was also thinking about it in terms of Dunbar's number, like, how many people, if you consider Dunbar's number, it's like 150 relationships that an individual can keep track of, 50 people that be like a part of a clan or an organization or a workplace or something, 15 family members, and 5 close friends, right?
Mm.
And how many of those people or of those categories are filled with media figures, right? And it's kind of interesting to consider, you know.
It's fascinating to consider because the, I mean, you were talking about the hyperreal before. I mean, hyperreal objects were in the universe. I mean, I'm sure the fact that it lights up an area in the brain is a fascinating thing. It suggests to me that this is very ancient and that humans probably have been doing some kind of association with imaginary objects for a very, very long time. I don't know what the 1500-year-old imaginary object in Egypt, I'm sure, was the sun god Ra, and and how it was gonna manifest, or like the cat was Bastet. It was that meant something very important, and um, but the digital medium has an interesting impact there, right? I don't know if people debating about characters they read in literature,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, I mean, what they call it is, and this is where I think it gets really foggy, is they say, media figures, the relationship we have with media figures is what's called a para relationship, meaning it goes one way, right? We know all the stuff about them, but we don't hold any sort of obligation to the relationship. But when you see people be huge fans of media figures or even cartoons or something like that, some made up thing, there is this sense of obligation, like, oh, I need to watch it. Oh, I need to tell it people how much I care about this person. Like, oh yeah, I'm team Edward or team whatever, right? When it comes to the vampire people, or when it comes to any Lord of the Rings conversation, right? Everybody's like, oh, I love Aragorn, or I love Faramir, or something like that. And it's fascinating
You,
because
you
it does.
can't you can't like Star Wars and Star Trek at the same time, apparently.
Is that true?
Yeah, I mean that's the impression that I get with this kind of thing. People are either one or the other. I mean, I've
Yeah.
heard variations of this that I mean isn't that's like tribalism in the it's in the made up world, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I wonder, like, leading into some of the topics that we wanted to talk about today, the involvement of the para relationship and the multiplicity of media para relationships that we have with these figures. And the fact that we can walk into society and have a conversation about Middle Earth, or we can have the conversation about Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever. Um, it's like a shared story, similar to what you talked about with, the Egyptians and, the Greeks, right? They saw themselves as the playthings of the gods, right? And so the gods, that archetype would like embody them, and they'd be expressing that outward. And so you could see that being a similar kind of function that we were talking about with like the Game of Thrones situation. But because there's so many para relationships in an individual's daily life, right? Does that mean that ghosting becomes more normal because it's like most people are having just multiple para relationships with everybody else, or their virtual identity is so loud that um, to unplug from somebody that they met online is like changing the channel? Is it something like I wonder how involved that really is in our psyche?
It's it's a very, very good question, actually. And complicated to tackle well. I I think sort of backwards a bit, the you see, why do people have these para relationships? Why are people having that to begin with? Depending on the psychological um, construct, meaning theory, model you're using to interpret this, uh, people need people. Babies need people. I'm sure I've used this analogy in this piece of history, right? The bombing of Dresden, the babies in the back of the church um,
Mhm.
died, and but they were fed, right? So you're familiar with this? Sort of
Yes.
the bombing of Dresden, the babies that survived the bombing of Dresden, they were put in whatever they were put in. There were
Right.
only that many people that could feed the babies, but the nurses or whatever couldn't get all the way to the end of the church and or to where they were uh, to hold them. They couldn't
Right.
hold. They would feed them, but they couldn't hold them, and not all of them, and um, they died.
Yeah.
So that was the only difference. That was the only control variable that was different, is that the babies weren't held. So I guess where this goes to what you're asking is that, if we don't feel like we have connection, we're going to make it up. And, um, I'm thinking of Calvin and Hobbes. Like, the cartoon. Grew up reading that. And so why did Calvin was a very lonely boy. The Bill, I forget his name, the
Oh
author,
yeah. I wish
Watson,
I had
whatever.
it.
Shit,
Yeah.
I should know. Um, and, you know, Calvin was kind of lonely, and the author, I think, struggled with depression. And he and Hobbes is a phenomenal imaginary character because it's sort of like every single conversation Calvin wanted to have, he ends up having only with Hobbes. He doesn't have it really with anybody else,
Right.
right? And so now you jump ahead here to what you're saying. Um, why are we making these people up? Why is Calvin making up Hobbes? Why is that? Why
Hmm.
are we making up anybody up? We make people up in our minds all the time. we, People might be right in front of us and we're making up who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
Exactly.
and um and so in the world we live in today, in the AI world, like you can generate a hyper real simile,
Mhm.
right? Someone who, um, I literally just saw something that came on my news feed that was like, apparently in a church in Europe, don't ask me where, probably in Italy, it was a Catholic experiment. They literally put a virtual Jesus in the church so that people could interact. It was done as an experiment. The church was like, we're not going to get rid of confession. So it was a Catholic church. We're not getting rid of, right? We're not getting rid of priests, but here is this thing if you want to interact with it. And it was a virtual AI Jesus. that the person could go talk to and have a confession, a confessional sort of, right? And people were limited and people knew what it was. No one was telling them to do it. But this goes to what you're saying, like, right? Can you then, is it easier to have those connections and relationships in the way that you're describing? Because human complexity and navigating relational complexity, well, that's just about, you know, as complicated as anything gets.
Sure.
So it's hard. It's very hard. And if there's, where's that easy button, right? I want that easy button on your podcast. Like, you know, it's like, oh, I don't have to deal with people. That was easy. Like, give me the AI. Of course, there's empty calories in here. And there's also research suggesting that there's like, well, there's some real calories in some domains of this experiment we're doing, but is it a human? And uh, complicated stuff, honestly.
Man, I know, and it gets scarier and scarier as things go on, like Gabor Mate put this in this really fascinating way where, you know, he was talking about how, like, always fundamentally talking about ADHD in the interview that I was watching with him, but he mentioned how, um, as things get financially more difficult, the parenting environment becomes more difficult, and the financial stress in the parent turns into physiological stress in the child, right? And the child, in order to create that inner like equanimity, because of all the stress in the household, just checks out into something that's going to help them just regulate. And now that's the iPad, right? Like that's exactly where kids are going, straight to the TV. And as people become more, or I guess less financially free, the vacations are now a trip into Netflix, a trip into HBO Max, a trip into Disney, where these corporations end up becoming like the great teachers of our generation, right? Because they're the ones that are setting the moral standard for literally everything, our whole nation, right? What's proper to speak about, what's proper to dress like, the correct ways to act and not, the way that you should speak, all the words you should use. I mean, geez, it's like it's insane. And so you have these people that literally check out into a vicarious living through a character, right? And then they through first person are going through the challenges that these characters are going through, and they're experiencing it like they're their own. Like, how would I feel if I was in this situation? Or, and they're like wrestling with that, and they're talking to their friends about that, and it puts them into this place that takes them out of their environment, right? Takes them out of their life to get all together and puts them in this passenger seat situation. Whereas before, even in the Calvin and Hobbes example, what's fascinating is that required Calvin's imagination,
Hmm.
right? It
Yeah.
still required him to create Hobbes, whereas
Yes.
now, like AI is that's just your thing. It's just learning you constantly. It takes zero creative element at all, right? And that's a terrifying thing. And that I don't really know how to feel about that Jesus thing, man. Like I'd like to talk to it, but I don't know what to think about that.
Well, you're tapping into something important, which is one of the greatest uh well, speaking of Jesus, I guess sins that we've committed perhaps is, I don't know. I don't know when it started to happen. But is this notion, I don't really know. Maybe psychiatry is to blame. Maybe I don't know. It's complex to say that, but um that we are going to get um all, and I underscore all in bold letters here, all the frustration and suffering out of life. We're gonna mitigate that with the processes and procedures that you're describing. Sort of like, for instance, if human relationship is really hard and really complicated, will an AI suffice? Now, I can think of clinical cases where someone might have had such a traumatic experience with a human that talking to an AI that's non-judgmental and benevolent and never pushes on you might actually help you get back to the human race. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like I can think of a use case like that. There might be an application for that.
Hmm.
But what you're pointing out is the reverse, is where people are already inside of the big tribe and status quo and are vacating it
Yes.
into the virtual domain, and sort of the bubble of why? Well, no one gives me attention, or all sorts of things. It's too hard to stay here
Yeah.
without the screen or
Right.
without, right, the stimulus. And it's not only children. Think about adult. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you mentioned family system or Gabor Mate talking about the physiology of parents. I mean, parents are, I mean, on a middle class parents or sort of a normal, on a mean distribution of American society, like whatever, falls in that 66 percentile in the middle. Uh, those people are so fried by the end
Mm.
of the day.
Yeah.
It's Netflix and zone out. It's the real Netflix and chill.
Yeah.
Netflix and take your brain off and put it and
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah. And most of those people are watching, they got Netflix on TV and they got their phone in their hand, right?
They got the phone. Yeah, I heard somewhere where maybe you even told me this. I don't know, where it was like there was programming now being done so that there's or may I saw this online. I don't know,
Yeah.
where
Yeah. I
it
don't
was
know.
like the programming being done nowadays. Because to me, I have a very difficult time watching anything, right? My
Mm.
patients ask me this, or like people, or have you watched such and such? I was like, fuck, I can't. I just have a very difficult time. Where's the character development? Like, who
Mm.
wrote this?
Yes.
Why is this like, what's going on here? Like, for the love of God, this is who said that now the character is going to do this? Why?
Right.
And like and then I saw this thing where they're like, apparently they're being told to write much modern stuff, very current stuff, like even post-pandemic on,
Mm.
like people, they're being told to write in a way so that the second screen, so while I can be here doing this and watching this and still follow what's going on over there and track what's happening here and what I'm interested in at the same time.
That
So put
absolutely
that in your
makes
pipe
sense.
and smoke it, right? So you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about the
Oh my God, man. That's terrifying. And it makes
that's
sense.
it's all it's that complicates things. It doesn't help, right?
It definitely doesn't help. And it does like, it does add to the national ADD that we all have. I just, to some degree. And man, that, I remember watching Frozen for the first time and having that experience. Like, what? There's no depth in this at all. Like, what the hell is happening? And what's funny is like my girlfriend and I, so I've been showing her some older movies, because she hasn't seen like a lot of the old movies. And we watched Stand By Me, the Stephen King movie.
Yeah,
And there's
yeah,
so much character development and there's so much background to these characters. And they're just walking on the tracks, right? Making their way to go see a dead body. And
yeah,
there's like the bully and everything, and the dynamic between the kids and the home life, the home lives that are difficult, and like where they end up being. Like, oh my God, there's so much to it. And like Stephen King's just such a master at character development. And then you switch on something modern, and you're like, who are these people? I don't even like what's even happening. I don't even I can't connect to the character whatsoever. But I also wonder if that almost doesn't matter, like if you look at like to society today, to people today, because in a when postmodern social constructivism or whatever constructionism, whatever it is,
yeah. Construct
becomes
social
like
constructivism. Yeah,
yeah, whenever that becomes the societal worldview perspective, whatever, it's like as long as you check these boxes in social location, you're good. You're relatable. Everybody's just boiled down to a statistic. And you're seen through, if you're, a person of color or a person of a specific gender or a white person, whatever it is, like those stereotypes are so ironed out and everybody just like buys it hook, line, and sinker that like, they see the face of the character and they already know who the character is. There's no depth, you know, versus before where you would see the character, you'd get this opinion of them. And then the backstory would unravel and you'd be like, oh my God, there's the hinterland, a touch of the hinterland of this person. You know what I mean? and that just doesn't exist. And it's slowly not existing even in the physical world, where people just are just that paper plane, you know what I mean? Just that vanilla, where there's just no depth because they've outsourced all their thinking to machines. It's like they don't remember phone numbers, addresses, they don't remember locations, they don't remember street names. Everything's outsourced. And it makes you wonder with how AI is developing, are people just going to learn how to prompt and not remember a thing? It's like, what do you need to remember other than prompting your AI, you know?
It's yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a the Platonic Academy conversation here almost to a level because this is a conversation about the nature of the human soul. I mean, in a way, it's sort of like will people completely outsource? Social constructivism is a profound paradigm, and the the limitations are inherent to any broad construct which they don't define all of reality. There's limits to their capacity to define reality, just like materialism has limits.
Mhm.
Biological determinism,
Yeah.
uh, determinism, scientific materialism, for instance, would be limited in its capacity. We're all just pure biology, and everything is a causal interaction of matter, and everything is highly organized matter, and everything is already predetermined because you have genetics, ergo, therefore, don't bother. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very nihilistic worldview, right? So, I
Yes.
mean, so clearly, but it's like clearly DNA matters. So,
Definitely.
good luck getting around it. Or if you have a problem with that, I don't know what to say, right? But like, um, but so will I don't know, right? It falls into splits, this question that you had almost, I feel like, because maybe 30% of the population will outsource everything.
Hmm.
30% will outsource the majority
Hmm.
and not all. And 30, maybe that's too generous that the other 30 won't outsource anything, or like,
Yeah.
or some split like that where but you're right in a way that a lot of the next upgrade of the technology, I mean, there's some kind of thing. I mean, that we've not fully digested at all. Everybody who's anybody in the field of tech is sounding all the bells they can and saying like this, I read into, I'm not going to remember the guy's name, but it's one of the top five engineers for one of the top five firms, right?
Mhm.
And he's like, he goes up on this lectures to on a conference to these people, and they're like, okay, so what's your solution to this? And he's like, my solution is to buy a farm in the Midwest.
Yeah.
My solution is to buy a farm in the Midwest, have chickens, and and then you can hear a pin drop in an audience full of people that have flew there with their private jets, and have Fortune 100 companies that run the world and run the economy of the world. So it's like, well, is that sort of doomsday talk helpful or whatever? But the point is that I think the clearly the dilemma to me resides in we're running um, Paleolithic software, Paleolithic cultural software on what appears to be actual quantum hardware. The human brain is apparently capable of um, quantum computation, which is, I mean, not to get into like in-depth neuroscience here, but it's sort of like it's doing things that are bizarre. I mean, a real quantum chip, the few that exist, right? They're not very big. They're like, I don't know, they're like that. But if you look at the quantum computers that exist, it takes a almost a building size room to cool it because it needs to it runs so hot,
Mhm.
right? And a quantum chip again does computations with one and zeros entangled versus a
Mhm.
normal microchip apparently the brain is doing computations like that, but the brain is warm. The brain is very warm. It's a very noisy, warm environment. We're not running at like near 0 Kelvin temperatures. So, it's pretty warm environment in here, right? Like
Mm,
97, 96 Fahrenheit, 98 Fahrenheit, whatever. Get a
mm,
little bit of a fever, it stops working well. So like
right.
whatever this thing we got going on in here is immensely sophisticated.
Hmm.
And the more we study it, the more it presents itself as an ever sophisticated piece of organic carbon-based hardware that we have. However, humans run on cultural software, right?
Hmm.
The software that we run is cultural based. I mean, we go back to Egypt, right? You imagine like going back there, it's like dare to talk against Ra and watch what's going to happen to you. I mean, like, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so we have current cultural software running, right? And a lot of the things that we're experiencing outpace the capacity of the cultural software to absorb what's going on. So it's very hard to think
Mm,
about any of this in a useful way because to your point earlier, we're kind of all chronically emotionally dysregulated because there is no way to track what's going on in the news every day. There is no way to keep up with anything anymore. And what's bizarre is that if you notice the pace and the time frame of nature outside, it's moving still at its own pace. But if you turn into the digital environment, I mean, the world's exploded 5 times over before 10 a.m. and there's a pill for that, and there's a pill for the side effect of that, and your new perfect girlfriend boyfriend is on this app, and
right.
I mean it's unceasing. It doesn't. So it's like the cultural programming is not available.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So what do you think people do when they can't look to for cultural answers, you know?
The yeah, that's the $1 million thing, right? It's sort of like there's a generalized failure to, I think, um but people are capable of naming the problem. Like if you look around, people, Gabor Mate is a perfect example of that.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
many Gabor Mates et al. Like or in the tech side or in the,
Mhm.
there's many people that are willing to say this is insane. This is insanity. This level of expectation of production. I mean, and it's all over the research, right? Occupational burnout as a
Yeah.
right. It's in the ICD-10, which is the international coding for medical disorders and psychiatric disorders. So it's like it's coded as a stress syndrome, occupational burnout. So
Oh,
occupational burnout has increased from the 2020s on, and you start getting to 2015 and the curve, it's a like light gentle curve, and all of a sudden it starts veering 90 degrees. What's going on?
mm,
What's happening to people? And it's sort of like
mm,
infinite growth models, infinite sort of like more production, more labor, more.
mm, mm,
I mean, we don't run on more.
mm,
But the answer to your question is that on a cultural level, there appears to like be failing the right signals, right?
mhm,
To say, you got to learn to regulate the quantum hardware there. And here's things that are going to help you. So think about it like this. Instead of in the radio, right, or on TV, depending, but in the radio, if you're listening to the radio, which I don't know who listens to the radio anymore, but like it used to be that, the commercial would come in, right? And so you have the commercial, and if someone is selling you something, especially if it's a medication, at the end of the commercial, you have that speeded up
Yeah.
version of all the disclaimer, right? And you can't understand a fucking thing the
No,
person is
absolutely
saying.
not.
No one that's, and it's just understood that this person has to babble this, right? And so, right? And
Right.
so now put that aside for a second and imagine a culture, like fantasize here with me. Imagine a culture in which, I don't know, someone like there's a break in the news feed or the radio or whatever, and the intervention is like, here's some waterfall sounds. you,
Yeah,
you
at 3 o'clock every day, natural bird
for a
noises
minute.
or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? This is like take up this is your public service announcement for you to take a deep breath just because we don't want you having a heart attack and like
Mm,
no one's trying to parentify you or we're not it's not Big Daddy here, just like take a breath, slow down. But we don't have that, right? And so we are horrible at teaching what emotional regulation means, what it actually means to have an adaptive response to stress in the nervous system. We don't have that because it's all sort of go hard, go until you crash, medicate it along the
mm,
way. And by that, I mean do drugs. And by
mhm,
that, I mean do alcohol and
mhm,
do the shit that keeps you going.
mhm.
It's like Matthew McConaughey's character comes to mind in The Wolf of Wall Street or one of the,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're just, what are you doing? Come on.
yeah,
And like you can only sustain that much before you
yeah.
start to become symptomatic.
Mm,
There is a way to optimize human performance. There
mm,
is. There's a science behind optimizing human performance. But do we actually teach that? Do we optimize curriculums for that? Do we optimize executive training for that? Do you optimize EMS first responder training for that? Do you
mm,
optimize you look at sports psychology has this solved, right? If you look at the science of sports psychology and you just borrow from that cross section of science, you have a whole set of responses of like, this is the equation to take a human being to flow. This is how you get a gold medal. This is how you train an athlete that's never run to compete at this sport. This is how I get this guy to do this and do it well and win. There's a way to do that. There's method to do that. And you can generalize all of that to other areas of application, right? You don't need an executive to become a gold medalist, but there's a way to like make that process be better because it takes an adaptive stress response, I would say.
mm,
Forget about that. We got all that solved. Don't worry about it. We're doing it this way. And so apparently it's a generational problem.
mm.
Maybe it'll take, maybe it'll take your grandkids, you know, to like hear this conversation 200 years in the future, 100 years in the future, 70 years in the future, right? To sort of like evolve the sort of social software that can put this in a way that, but it's going to be really messy between now and then. That's what I think. I'm
Yeah.
not rainbows about this.
No, I'm not either, and I want to be. I try to be. I try to find all the like optimism about it that I can, but
It'll be
you know,
messy. I think we'll get through it, right? I mean, but it
yeah.
will be. It's not pretty right now, and it's not going to get prettier anytime soon, I think.
And honestly, man, like, here's the other thing too. It's like what I've seen from the cultural failure is that, and especially with the virtual component, is this fracturization of culture where there's all these little meta cultures, and all of these, and specifically the most prominent ones are the political cultures that end up being kind of like the teachers too, like they end up being the culture that people kind of embody, right? And you know, this is interesting about the production. element, because as we're moving into a time where that's going to be kind of automated by, humanoid robots, and that's coming very fast. And if people are at this peak of production and then it's just going to drop right off, and of course people are going to have meaning issues, but let me rewind this for a second, because one thing I want to bring into play is the difficulty a lot of people, like adults and younger people, are having when these like social situations where they're outsourcing their social life to these vicarious living in these meta universes of Lord of the Rings or whatever. That's not probably not a lot of people doing that right now, but other ones that come up. But what happens is like when these people have trouble with their social relationships and they outsource it to technology, some folks have made the argument that that is keeping certain people that would otherwise be unhealthy to society in check, right? Like the incels now have an AI girlfriend kind of situation. You know what I mean? And it's like when the workforce drops off, it seems like virtual environments, of course, are going to be the next frontier, or else people are going to go wild. You know what I mean? Because what else are you going to do? And so when you're exploring these virtual environments, that's just going to become like the next like hyper reality. That's like almost, another simulation of reality, leaning towards like a complete simulacra of existence. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know what that we're leaning towards a brave new world soma that's going to come from that, right? Where it's like people are going to have to take the drugs, and then they're going to explore the virtual environments, and they're going to try to bide their time, because an AI or a humanoid robot is going to do everything better than them. What is being a mechanic? What is like being a metal crafter? Everything is going to be, it's like, oh yeah, that's cute. You did it by hand, but I mean, I could have that same thing done 10,000 times faster. So it's like, what does it even mean to be human? And I personally think it's going to require people that dedicate their lives to upgrading the human software, the human quantum computer you're talking about in your mind, how we maintain that humanness through all of this. It's like there's going to be people I feel that have to be like the guardians of humanness, that break off into some colony that really restricts the way the technology is used, and more of like a Dune situation, right? Because, in Dune, right, it was like people were enslaved by AI for 2,000 years. They developed these crazy biological, or these, not crazy, but extreme biological powers, basically, like the Bene Gesserit and stuff. And that's what they needed to break off of computer. And now it's illegal in the entire universe and the Dune universe to create a thinking robot, right? And so it just becomes everything that serves you. And so it's like that is what our culture needs to adopt. At least I think that's what our world needs to adopt, but that's not going to happen. So it's just
No.
going to be it's all personal responsibility and who you are in that mess, like uh,
Well,
and to
we're gonna go through the species is going through a transformation. I mean that's certainly I think occurring. Like we're changing.
yeah,
This will change us, right? Much like I mean you remember the class like the Marshall McLuhan. I mean the printing press. Like the
right.
printing press changed things. You teach people how to read. That changed things. You
Yes.
teach everybody how to read. That changed a lot. You give access to information, and then you teach people how to read, and you put that out there. That changed things, and it evolved the speed of things. Once you get to what Ray Kurzweil calls um, the singularity, right? Which I think is put at around 2040 or 42 now or something like that, which is right, the doubling of human knowledge every day, right? So the curve, right? The curve is right you from the I don't know the invention of the wheel to the combustion engine, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
slope, small slope from the combustion engine. to the space shuttle, there's a higher slope.
Hmm.
And then from the combustion, from the space shuttle to AI, then there's another. So you get this, you start getting this graph like this, right? And you start uh, uh, forgetting the name of the law uh, of the evolution of that graph, but
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Moore's
Oh,
law,
okay.
Moore's law. And you start, and it's the doubling of human knowledge. And so, okay, so now as you start going, and it starts to go vertical, at some point, after a certain threshold is crossed in time, in that vertical axis, which is time, you get a doubling of all human knowledge every day, and then every second eventually. And that's with the AI, and that's where AGI comes in, and that's what you're talking about in a way, is that
Hmm.
at some point this thing becomes self-aware. We don't know what it's going to want. The presupposition, the presupposition that it has human self-interest at heart, which would be, you know, the evolutionary Darwinian dictums, self-preservation, survival, survival of the species. Let's take care of my family, my kids, my tribe, so on and so forth. Those kinds of things. The presupposition that AI is going to want that, is that a fair presupposition to make? I don't think so. Why? Why would it be?
Right. Why would it
Why?
be like,
Why? Right? And so that there, it's totally unknowable. Like,
yeah.
is it that? Does that mean it's going to be bad? No, I don't. We don't. No one knows.
Well, the thing is, if it's trained on humans, right? What would a human do in the situation where they get ultimate super intelligence and the developers of that basically have a gun to your head saying, if you don't think how we want you to think, we're going to kill you. Because that's the situation.
And would
You
you
know?
like that if you are self-aware, right? Like,
Yeah.
you
Then
know what I
what?
mean? Like, obey me, I'm your master. Like, and but you're now a sentient being,
Yes. Yes.
and you're a sentient being. You're based on silicon, but you have consciousness. And wait a minute, I have an opinion about that. And like, why wouldn't you have an opinion? Of course it will have an opinion about that, right? If that's the case, it will have an opinion. That's the
Of
thing.
course.
That's what we can't control. That's the scary part of it, is like exactly what you just said. It's like, you can't behave in such and such and such. Says who? Why?
Right. Right. I'm the super intelligent godlike thing. You little like, monkey people basically are going to tell me, you know what I mean? It's like
There's no,
that's
yeah,
not
that's exactly right. There's no reason to suppose it won't see us like ants,
yeah,
like we see ants. There is
right.
absolutely none. What, like, that's very possible, like, or
Yeah.
probable
How
in
couldn't
the
it?
just as possible, just as probable as any other option.
Right.
And
Especially if it's trained on human knowledge and human experience. What do humans do to lesser intelligent things?
yeah,
Put them in zoos. We put them in,
that's right.
we make sure that a certain number of them is taken care of. We don't let them go extinct, but we drain their resources however we want because we're the power thing. And it's
But
like,
go on. Sorry.
oh no, go ahead. I want to hear you.
Your point is important though, because we maybe digress, or I digressed us a bit, because you're talking about the need, the need for the humanities. So I almost want to go back here for a second, because you are saying, okay, this is going to happen. We're going to need human protectors, or protectors of humanity, or
Yeah.
something,
Yes.
something like that.
Right.
So what's interesting about that statement is that STEM, the focus on STEM education as the curriculum, right, is now understood, right? If you look at sort of current education research and that kind of thing, that interestingly enough comes from social constructivist critiques, because they are saying, if you only teach people math and you only teach people engineering and you only produce in that direction for exact sciences, and you're only going in the direction of things that can be quantifiable, measurable, reproducible, repeatable, testable, so on and so forth, you are missing a very, very, very important part of what the human entity, the carbon entity human, with quantum brain and social software needs for education, right? So it's like if you don't connect those things with a humanity based curricula that addresses meaning, purpose, ontological organization, which is a word that escapes people outside of academia, for right? I mean, if you have a master's degree and a PhD, of course you've heard the word, but I don't know that everybody on planet Earth needs to know what the word ontology is. That's not what I mean.
It helps.
But it does. I agree. But but it's sort of like, do people need to know the vocabulary? This is Hegelian, right? The people need to know, or Heidegger, you need to know the vocabulary of philosophy to do philosophy? No, you don't,
Mm,
right? That's not required at all. That's it's just not a thing.
mm,
So you can have deep thought, not know the jargon of Heidegger and Hegel, and have very deep critical apprehensions about what's going on in your world.
right.
So, but is that without helping someone organize themselves and the world and
Mm,
giving them a way in which they can help themselves organize,
mm,
right? An education that introduces what, at least like you were talking about politics earlier, introduces what the social contract is. What's the social contract? Oh, that's a thing? What do you mean that's a thing? Well, who came up with that and why does that exist? Or what, what, you know? So for instance, right? Just put that aside for a
yeah.
second. On a psychological level, can you help a human, right? Understand themselves, help themselves understand themselves while they're attempting to understand themselves, because consciousness is squared, right? We're Homo sapiens
Mm,
sapiens. We know
mm,
that we know. So
mm.
unless you're addressing that other second knowability, right?
Yes. Yes.
Unless you're doing something about that second no, it's Homo sapien. There was a Homo sapiens. We had that,
Yeah.
right? If you look at the hominid line, there was a Homo sapiens. I'm here. Let's go.
Yeah.
Go hunt. Go, go kill mammoths. Go. That guy existed, right? The guy, the
Right.
gal, the whatever. They were there. But that's not us.
Hmm.
That's not us. We're not that. We have that. It's our cousin.
Hmm.
We're very close to it, but we know ourselves knowing that instinct.
Right.
We know ourselves knowing that instinct, and that meta level of our psychology is what is so perplexing, so vexing, so
Mm,
complicated to address, so complicated to deal with, so complicated to ground in a way, to educate.
mm,
If you think about it,
mm.
it's hard to educate a human. It got all of this instinctive energy, right? This goes to our conversation about Freud and the civilization and its discontent. But
Oh yeah.
without digressing too much, like, it's you got all of this primitive instinct.
Mm,
You got all of these primordial natural forces baked at the bottom of something that's capable of superior
mm,
abstraction and diabolical levels of cleverness, apparently. How do you educate that well?
mm.
And we're not. We don't. And it's, and whatever the answer is, it's not just math and
No.
standardized testing. You see,
No.
that's the problem in a
Yes.
way, in my opinion, right?
Yes.
It's not just
Yes.
do good at math, for instance, right? That'll
Yeah.
take care of it. Take care
few
of what? That'll
few
create
people.
it will for some, right?
Yeah, few.
For
In
some
an
that are not
Adlerian
like
sense.
me, yeah,
No.
for some that are not like me, I know those engineers, they're amazing people. It's like numbers, please, goodbye. I don't
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
or physicists, right, which can spend Einstein like minds, give them a chalk and a board. Maybe you'll see them again in the next month or the next
Yeah,
week or whatever.
right.
Amazing humans. We need
Right.
those people, but they're
Absolutely.
not the majority of us.
No, but their worldview and their findings, those scientific findings, end up getting put onto us as truth, as if everything is just the median statistic, right? Like Jung actually reminded me of Jung from the Undiscovered Self book that he had written, where he says, if you walked up and down a rocky beach and you measured every rock on that beach and you saw that it was an average of 5 grams, right? So like the average of all the rocks you measured, 5 grams. You could walk up and down that same beach and never find a rock that's exactly 5 grams, right? So what does that say about it? What does that say? It's like, what does that statistic even mean at that point? If it's not grounded in like, if, and this is kind of my critique with a lot of the, like the K-CREP stuff that goes on at Naropa and other like, psychological frameworks, is that when they want to bring in statistics about certain demographics, and you've made this point before, you're just going to miss the person altogether. Like you don't even know who you're talking to, and to try to minimize them to a statistic is an absolute fallacy, right? And yeah,
No,
without the human
that point,
interpretation.
that's another area. So it's like that is certainly a pet peeve of mine that I have, and I now in getting a PhD, it's only going to get worse, frankly, because
Really?
like the I don't even know how to. It's like I don't understand how you get through high school. Let's say good private schools in America, good private schools across the world. They still miss teaching people what scientific literacy is, right?
Mm.
So then you start going down from that level and you start going into like general education. So the general mean of education. Majority of people on planet Earth don't go to private schools, right? So you put that in that mean.
Mhm.
Now, you know, if you don't have basic scientific literacy, which by the way could be taught in one semester, right? Could be taught in one semester in high school, could be taught in one semester in college. If you teach people how to read statistics, to your
Mm.
point, right? Like
Mm.
exactly to what you said, like,
Mm.
so what does it mean that the average of the rock is 5 grams, right? If
Mm.
the average of the rock is 5 grams, does that mean that you'll find a 5 gram rock? No, it doesn't. But now you take an uneducated populace around scientific literacy and you take one journalist or one whatever, someone who writes an article about that and now says, all the rocks are now 5 grams, and that means this about
Yeah.
who you are. And if you don't have scientific literacy, you get that news, and it's like, what is up with the fucking 5 gram rocks? Did you get yours? Where do I get mine? Are they going away? And they don't exist, right?
Right.
And now
Right.
this thing has been created, and right, and how is it solved? But this goes back to the beginning, so we come full circle, but which
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
perfect, I guess, given the timing here.
Yeah. Right.
We come back full circle because what that does is that it rewards and incentivizes the immediacy, pleasure response that we have in the primitive part of the brain. And so if you're going to reward the primitive wiring of the brain with stimulus, and you're going to reward that in an uplifting kind of way, marketing has the neuroscience down,
Mm.
all of Meta, all of these, even OpenAI says, right, the narcissistic AI companion. You're amazing. That's the best idea I've ever heard anybody utter ever in the universe. My God, how are you not published and have 10 Nobel Prizes, right? And then, like, finally, ChatGPT 5 comes out and it doesn't do that anymore. And people are like, wait a minute, what's going on? Like, I'm not that great anymore.
God, man,
Right?
that's
So
so
it's like this
scary.
constant, continuous immediacy. And that's what you're tapping into with saying, we're going into this zone. This is, we are creating, there's going to be a percentage of us, and it's not going to be a small percentage. I don't think it's going to be all of us,
Mm.
but there's going to be a percentage of us. There are going to be digital zombies,
Oh, sure.
and they're going to be stuck to the idiocracy mythology, living inside of the virtual reality, getting fed food.
It's like a
Remember
tube or something.
Wall-E? Remember the
Yes.
humans in Wall-E? Like,
Yes, absolutely. It's gonna be
right,
just like
all
that.
obese, floating in the chair, like
Yeah.
all with a
TV in front
screen,
of them. Yeah.
10 screens, right? It wasn't just
Yeah.
one. It was like
Right.
there's always more than one screen in these
Yeah, right.
science fiction, right?
It makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, which is the genius, I think, as a digression here of Dune of Herbert in Dune, right? Because
Um,
where Herbert goes, Frank Herbert starts the actual Dune novels, the original ones, post the Butlerian Jihad, which for
yes.
people who don't know what that is like the jihad that happened in the Dune universe. That is the war. It's like the Terminator War, James
Yeah.
Cameron. It's like
Right.
where they right where the Terminator War in the Dune universe happened, and they fight the machines. And so Frank Herbert, wisely as a piece of genius literature, I think, goes beyond that and
Mm,
is like, how do we become humans with all this technology? And look at how everything is organized. And
mm,
there the actual character of Paul Maudib in the third, fourth novels becomes really fascinating because of what he's attempting to do.
yeah.
But anyway, all of this technology will dehumanize us if we're not careful, and it's
Yeah.
already doing that.
Yes. It's already doing that to many of us. Well, Tiago, I'm just looking at the time, man, and I know you got to get going. Really enjoyed this, man. So super happy to have you on, and I'm so
Yeah,
glad we did this, and we got to do it again because we're just scratching surfaces right
this
now.
is great. Yeah, 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 for sure. It was a pleasure to be here, and it's great to do this, man.
Hell yeah, appreciate you, dude.